The rain hammered against my umbrella as I stood outside apartment 304, my baby son nestled against my chest in his carrier. My finger hovered over the doorbell, trembling. 9 months ago, the man behind this door had walked out of my life without looking back. He deleted my number, blocked me on everything, and disappeared like I had never mattered. But now I was here, about to change both our lives forever. Because the tiny human sleeping against my heartbeat, he had his father's nose, his father's hands, and his father's right to know he existed. I pressed the button and heard the chime echo inside. Footsteps approached. My breath caught in my throat. This was it. My name is Gunwoo, and I never imagined my life would fall apart on a Tuesday evening in March. That was the day Eunwoo came home from his shift at Seoul Memorial Hospital with that look on his face, the one I'd been dreading for weeks. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes were distant, and he didn't kiss me hello like he used to. Instead, he set his medical bag down by the door with a heavy thud that seemed to echo through our small apartment. "We need to talk," he said, and those 4 words made my stomach drop like I'd swallowed ice. I was in the kitchen making his favorite soup, the one with hand-pulled noodles and beef broth that took 3 hours to prepare properly. I'd taken the afternoon off from my office job just to make it for him, because I knew he'd been stressed. The steam was still rising from the pot, filling our home with warmth and the smell of comfort. But none of that mattered now. "Okay," I managed to say, even though my voice came out smaller than I wanted. I turned off the stove and followed him to our living room couch, the same couch where we'd spent countless evenings watching movies together, where he'd fallen asleep with his head in my lap after particularly brutal shifts, where we'd made plans for our future. Now it felt like a completely different piece of furniture, cold and unfamiliar. Eunwoo sat down and put his head in his hands. He stayed like that for what felt like forever, and I just waited, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Finally, he looked up at me, and I saw something in his eyes that scared me more than anger or frustration. It was emptiness. "I can't do this anymore. This relationship, us. I need space." The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd known things had been difficult lately. Eunwoo had been working 70-hour weeks at the hospital, coming home exhausted and irritable. We'd been arguing more, about little things mostly, like dishes in the sink or forgetting to buy milk. But I thought we were just going through a rough patch, the kind every couple faces. I thought we'd get through it together.
"What do you mean?" I asked, even though I knew exactly what he meant. I just needed him to say it clearly, to make it real. "I mean, I think we should break up," Eunwoo said, and his voice was so calm, so matter-of-fact, like he was diagnosing a patient instead of ending our 2-year relationship. "I'm too stressed with work. I don't have the energy for this. For us. It's not fair to you." "Not fair to me?" I repeated, and suddenly I felt anger rising in my chest, hot and sharp. "You think breaking up is what's fair to me? Eunwoo, I love you. I've been patient, I've been supportive. I make you dinner even when you come home at midnight. I do your laundry. I listen to you talk about your cases. I hold you when you've had bad days. And now you're just giving up?" "I'm not giving up," he said, but his voice cracked a little. "I'm being realistic. Look at us, Eunwoo. We barely see each other anymore. When we do, we're either fighting or I'm too tired to talk. You deserve someone who can actually be present in a relationship." "I don't want someone else," I said, and I heard my voice breaking. "I want you. We can work through this. You can talk to your supervisor about reducing your hours, or we could try counseling, or—" "No," Eunwoo interrupted, and the finality in that single word stopped me cold. "I've made up my mind. This isn't healthy for either of us anymore." We argued for another hour, going in circles. I begged him to reconsider, to give us another chance, to at least think about it for a few days. But Eunwoo had that stubborn set to his jaw that I knew too well. When he made a decision about something, he didn't change his mind easily. It was one of the things I'd loved about him, his decisiveness, but now it was the thing tearing us apart. Finally, exhausted and emotionally drained, I said, "Fine. If that's what you really want, then fine." I regretted those words the moment they left my mouth, but it was too late to take them back. Eunwoo nodded slowly, like I'd just confirmed something he'd already known. He stood up from the couch and walked to our bedroom without another word. I sat there alone in the living room, staring at nothing, unable to process what had just happened. The soup I'd made was getting cold in the kitchen. Outside, the city lights twinkled like nothing had changed, like my entire world hadn't just collapsed. The next morning, I woke up hoping it had all been a terrible nightmare. But when I rolled over, Eunwoo's side of the bed was empty and already cold. I heard sounds from the bedroom, the zip of a suitcase, the scrape of hangers in the closet. My heart sank all over again.
I got up and found Eunwoo packing his clothes into 2 large suitcases. He was methodical about it, folding each item carefully, organizing everything by type. He'd always been neat like that, organized to a fault. It was such a normal, everyday action, but watching him pack to leave made me feel sick. "You're really leaving right now?" I asked from the doorway. "I think it's better this way," Eunwoo said, without looking at me. "Clean break. I'm gonna stay with my brother for a while, until I find my own place." "We could have talked more," I said weakly. "We could have—" "Gunwoo, please," Eunwoo said, and finally he looked at me. His eyes were red, and I realized he'd been crying. That almost made it worse, knowing this hurt him too, but he was doing it anyway. "Don't make this harder than it already is." I watched in numb silence as he finished packing. He took his clothes, his books, his medical journals, the expensive coffee maker he'd bought last year. He left behind photos of us, gifts I'd given him, all the little pieces of our life together. I didn't know if that meant something or nothing at all. When he was done, he stood by the door with his suitcases, and we just looked at each other. I wanted to run to him, to throw my arms around him and beg him one more time to stay, but my pride and my hurt kept my feet frozen to the floor. "I'm sorry," Eunwoo said quietly. "I really am." Then he opened the door and left, just like that. 2 years together, gone in less than 24 hours. I stood there for a long time after the door closed, staring at the space where he'd been. Then I walked to the couch, sat down, and cried harder than I ever cried in my life. I cried until my throat hurt and my eyes were swollen, and there were no more tears left. My best friend Kibom came over that evening. I'd texted him what happened, and he showed up with ice cream, tissues, and a fierce hug that made me start crying all over again. "He's an idiot," Kibom declared, settling onto the couch beside me. "A complete and total idiot. You're amazing, and he's gonna regret this."
"He seemed pretty sure about his decision," I said miserably, stabbing at the ice cream without really eating it. "People make stupid decisions when they're stressed," Kibom said. "Give him a few days. He'll realize what he's lost and come crawling back." But days passed, and Eunwoo didn't call. I stared at my phone constantly, willing it to ring, jumping every time I got a notification, but it was never him. After a week, I tried calling him, but my call wouldn't go through. I tried texting, but the messages turned green instead of blue. He'd blocked me. He'd actually blocked my number. The realization hit me like a truck. He wasn't coming back. He wasn't going to change his mind. He'd completely cut me out of his life, deleted me like I was spam, like our 2 years together had meant nothing at all. I threw myself into work, trying to distract myself from the constant ache in my chest. My coworkers noticed I wasn't myself, but I brushed off their concerns with fake smiles and excuses about being tired. At night, I'd come home to our apartment that felt too big and too empty now, and I'd force myself to eat something before falling into bed exhausted. 2 weeks after the breakup, I woke up feeling terrible. My stomach was churning, and I barely made it to the bathroom before I got sick. I figured it was stress, or maybe I'd eaten something bad. But the next morning, the same thing happened, and the morning after that. Keebam noticed during one of his check-in visits. "You look pale," he said, studying my face with concern. "And you've lost weight. When did you last eat a real meal?" "I eat," I protested weakly. "Ice cream and instant noodles don't count," Keebam said firmly. "And this morning sickness thing you've got going on? That's not normal stress, Gunwoo. You need to see a doctor." I tried to argue, but Keebam wasn't having it. He practically dragged me to a clinic the next day, sitting with me in the waiting room and holding my hand when I got nervous. The doctor was a kind older woman who asked me a bunch of questions about my symptoms and when they'd started. Then she asked me something that made my brain short-circuit. "Is there any chance you could be pregnant?" I laughed. It was such an absurd question. Except then I remembered that in our world, some men have the ability to carry children. It's rare, maybe 1 in every 1,000 men, but it happens. And I'd never actually been tested to see if I was one of them, because I'd never needed to know. The doctor must have seen something change in my face, because she said gently, "Why don't we run a test, just to be sure?" 20 minutes later, I was staring at test results that confirmed I was, in fact, pregnant. 8 weeks along, according to the blood work. The doctor explained that I was one of those rare men with the biological capability to conceive and carry a child. The news was so shocking, so completely unexpected, that I just sat there in stunned silence.
"Do you have a partner who should be here for this?" the doctor asked kindly. That's when everything crashed down on me at once. I had a partner, or I used to. The father of this baby had walked out on me, blocked my number, and wanted nothing to do with me. And now I was pregnant with his child, alone and terrified. I left the clinic in a daze, with Keebam's arm around my shoulders, holding me steady. We sat in his car in the parking lot for over an hour while I processed everything. A baby. I was going to have a baby. Eunwoo's baby. "You have options," Keebam said carefully. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you." I thought about it long and hard over the next few days. I thought about my future, my career, my ability to raise a child alone. I thought about Eunwoo and whether he deserved to know. Most of all, I thought about the tiny life growing inside me, this unexpected miracle that was half me and half the man I still loved despite everything. "I'm keeping the baby," I told Keebam one evening. "I know it's going to be hard, but I want this child." "Then I'm here for you," Keebam said immediately. "Whatever you need. Midnight cravings, baby shopping, someone to hold your hair back when you're sick, I'm your guy." "Thank you," I said, hugging him tight. "But I need to tell Eunwoo. He has a right to know." I tried calling again, but I was still blocked. So I went to Seoul Memorial Hospital, the place where Eunwoo worked, my heart pounding the entire subway ride there. But when I asked for Dr. Kang Eunwoo at the front desk, the receptionist told me he no longer worked there. "He transferred to another hospital in Busan about a week ago," she said. "I'm sorry, I can't give out his new contact information." Busan. He'd moved to a completely different city, hours away. He'd really meant it when he said he needed space. He'd put an entire city between us. I left the hospital feeling defeated and lost. I'd tried to do the right thing, but Eunwoo had made it impossible to reach him. So I made a decision. I would have this baby on my own, and I would be the best parent I could be. If Eunwoo ever came back into my life, I'd tell him then. But until that day, I was on my own. Kibom was true to his word, supporting me through every step of my pregnancy. He went with me to doctor's appointments, helped me set up a nursery in my apartment's spare room, and held my hand during the scary moments when I worried about doing this alone. And slowly, as my belly grew and I felt the baby moving inside me, I fell in love with this little person I hadn't planned for, but already couldn't imagine my life without.
The sound of my baby crying at 3 in the morning was both exhausting and beautiful. I stumbled out of bed, still half asleep, and picked up my son from his crib. Min-yoon. I'd named him Min-yoon because it meant brightness and handsome, and he was both of those things and so much more. "Shh, it's okay. Daddy's here," I murmured, cradling him against my chest as I walked to the kitchen to warm up a bottle. At 3 months old, Min-yoon had settled into something resembling a routine, though routine was a generous word for the chaos of new parenthood. I fed him in the rocking chair Kibum had bought for the nursery, watching his tiny hands curl around my finger as he drank. His eyes were starting to change color, turning from the dark blue all babies are born with to a warm brown that reminded me painfully of Eunwoo. In fact, everything about Min-yoon reminded me of Eunwoo. He had his father's nose, his father's chin, even the same little wrinkle between his eyebrows when he was concentrating. Sometimes I'd look at my son and feel this overwhelming wave of sadness that Eunwoo didn't know he existed. Other times I felt angry that he'd made it so impossible for me to tell him. But mostly, I just felt love for this perfect little person who'd completely taken over my life in the best possible way. Kibum had been an absolute lifesaver. He came over almost every day, bringing groceries, helping with laundry, and giving me breaks so I could shower or nap or just exist as something other than a feeding machine for a few hours. He'd learned how to change diapers, warm bottles, and burp a baby with surprising skill. "You're basically Min-yoon's second dad at this point," I'd told him last week, and he'd beamed with pride. "I'm the cool uncle," Kibum had corrected. "When he's older, I'll teach him all the things you won't approve of, like staying up past bedtime and eating candy for breakfast." But even with Kibum's help, being a single parent was the hardest thing I'd ever done. My maternity leave from work was ending soon, and I was stressed about finding good childcare I could afford. Money was tight, really tight, even though I was being as careful as possible with my spending. Some nights I lay awake worrying about how I'd pay for everything Min-yoon needed as he grew. Still, I wouldn't trade it for anything. Min-yoon had given my life new purpose, new meaning. Every smile, every coo, every tiny milestone made all the sleepless nights and constant worry worth it. One Saturday afternoon, Kibum came over looking unusually excited. He had his laptop with him and an expression I recognized as trouble.
"Don't freak out," he said, which immediately made me start freaking out. "What did you do?" I asked, suspiciously. "I didn't do anything," Kibum said. "I just found something. Or someone, actually. Gunwoo Eunwoo is back in Seoul." My heart stopped. What? I was looking at the Seoul Memorial Hospital website because I was curious about something, and I saw his name listed in the cardiology department, Kibum explained, turning his laptop to show me. "He transferred back about 2 weeks ago. Look, there's even a photo from some hospital event." I stared at the screen. It was definitely Eunwoo, looking professional in his white coat, shaking hands with some hospital administrator. He looked different somehow. Older, maybe, or just more tired. But it was definitely him, here in Seoul, in the same city as me and our son. My hands started shaking. Why would he come back? "I don't know," Kibum said, gently. "But Gunwoo, this is your chance. You tried to tell him before, but he'd moved away. Now he's here. He deserves to know about Min-yoon." I looked over at my son, who was napping peacefully in his bouncer, completely unaware that his world might be about to change. What if he doesn't want to know? What if he gets angry that I didn't try harder to find him? "Then he's still an idiot," Kibum said firmly, "but you'll know you did the right thing.
Minjun deserves to have a father, and Eunwoo deserves the chance to be one, even if he screwed up before. I thought about it for the rest of the day and all through the night. Kibum had managed to find Eunwoo's new address through some internet detective work I probably didn't want to know the details about. It was an apartment building in Gangnam, not too far from the hospital. The question was whether I had the courage to show up there and turn both our lives upside down. It took me 3 more days to work up the nerve. I planned it carefully, picking a Saturday when I knew Eunwoo would likely be home, dressing Minjun in the cute outfit Kibum had bought him, packing a diaper bag with everything we might need. Kibum offered to come with me for moral support, but I told him I needed to do this alone.
The taxi ride to Eunwoo's building felt like it took forever and no time at all. I held Minjun close, drawing strength from his warm weight against my chest. He gurgled happily, completely unconcerned about the monumental thing we were about to do. It started raining just as we arrived, a sudden downpour that came out of nowhere. I hurried into the building's entrance, shaking water off my umbrella while trying not to jostle Minjun too much. The security guard looked at me questioningly, and I managed to say, "I'm here to see Kang Eunwoo in 304. He called up, and after what felt like an eternity, he nodded and gestured toward the elevators. My legs felt like jelly as I rode up to the 3rd floor. The hallway was quiet, upscale, with soft lighting and expensive-looking artwork on the walls. This was a nice building, much nicer than our old apartment. Eunwoo was clearly doing well for himself. I stood outside apartment 304 for a full minute, just breathing, trying to calm my racing heart. Minjun started fussing a little, probably picking up on my anxiety. I adjusted his carrier, made sure he was comfortable, and then, before I could talk myself out of it, I pressed the doorbell. Footsteps approached from inside. The lock clicked. The door opened. And there was Eunwoo, wearing sweatpants and an old t-shirt I recognized from when we were together, his hair messy like he'd been napping. He looked at me with complete shock, his mouth literally falling open. "Gunwoo?" he said, like he couldn't believe his eyes. "What are you—" Then his gaze dropped to the baby carrier strapped to my chest, to Minjun's face peeking out from the soft fabric. Eunwoo went completely still, his eyes widening as he took in every detail of our son's features. I watched him process it, saw the exact moment recognition dawned in his eyes. Because Minjun looked like him. There was no denying it, no question about paternity. Our son had his father's face, clear as day. "This is Minjun," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, despite how badly I was shaking inside. "He's 3 months old. He's your son. Our son." Eunwoo's face went through about 5 different emotions in as many seconds. Shock, disbelief, confusion, and something that might have been fear. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, but no words came out. "Can we come in?" I asked quietly. "We need to talk." Eunwoo stepped back mechanically, like his body was moving on autopilot while his brain tried to catch up. I walked into his apartment, taking in the modern furniture, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the general neatness of everything. It was so different from the cozy, slightly messy apartment we'd shared. But somehow, it felt empty despite being full of expensive things. I sat down on his couch, carefully unstrapping Minjun from the carrier. Our son had woken up and was looking around with wide, curious eyes. Eunwoo stood a few feet away, staring at us like we were apparitions that might disappear if he blinked.
"How?" he finally managed to say. "When? I don't understand."
So I told him everything. I told him about finding out I was pregnant 2 weeks after he left,
about trying to reach him only to discover I was blocked, about going to the hospital and learning he'd moved to Busan. I told him about being scared and alone, about Kibum helping me through it all, about making the decision to raise Minjun on my own because I had no other choice. Eunwoo sank into a chair across from me, his face pale. "You tried to tell me?" he asked hoarsely. "Of course I tried to tell you," I said, and I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. "You blocked my number, Eunwoo. You made it impossible to reach you. Then you moved to another city without telling anyone where you went. What was I supposed to do?" "I'm so sorry," Eunwoo whispered, and his eyes were filling with tears. "I'm so sorry, Gunwoo. I didn't know. If I'd known." "Well, now you know," I said. I felt Minjun starting to fuss and automatically started bouncing him gently. "I'm not here to ask you for anything. I've managed fine on my own. But you deserved to know you have a son. And someday, when he's old enough to ask about his father, I didn't want to have to tell him I never tried to tell you about him." Eunwoo was crying now, tears streaming down his face. "Can I hold him?" he asked hesitantly. "Please?" I looked at him for a long moment, then carefully stood up and crossed the space between us. I placed Minjun in his father's arms for the very first time, showing Eunwoo how to support his head, how to hold him securely. Eunwoo looked down at our son with an expression of such pure wonder and devastation that it made my own eyes sting with tears. "He's perfect," Eunwoo breathed. "He's absolutely perfect. He has my nose." "And your chin," I said quietly. "And he makes the same face you do when he's concentrating on something." "I've missed 3 months of his life," Eunwoo said, and his voice cracked. 3 months! His birth, his first smiles, everything. I'm so sorry, Gunwoo. I'm so incredibly sorry for all of it." We talked for hours. I told him about my pregnancy, about the birth, about every little detail of Minjun's short life so far. Eunwoo listened to everything, still holding our son, occasionally asking questions or wiping away tears. He told me about why he'd come back to Seoul, how his time in Busan had been miserable, how he'd realized too late that running away from his problems had been the biggest mistake of his life. He'd transferred back hoping to find some peace, never imagining that I'd be standing on his doorstep with his child. "What happens now?" Eunwoo asked, eventually, his voice small and uncertain in a way I'd never heard him from before. "I don't know," I admitted. "That's up to you. I'm not going to force you to be involved if you don't want to be, but if you do want to be part of his life, we'll figure something out." "If I want to be?" Eunwoo repeated, looking at me like I'd grown a second head. "Gunwoo, of course I want to be part of his life. He's my son. I've already missed so much. I don't want to miss anything else." Something in my chest loosened at those words, a tension I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. "Okay," I said. "Okay, then we'll work something out."
Minjun started crying, his hungry cry that I knew meant he needed to be fed soon. I glanced at my watch and realized hours had passed. "I should go," I said. "He needs to eat and it's almost his bedtime." Eunwoo looked reluctant to let go of Minjun, but he carefully handed him back to me. "Can I see him again? Tomorrow, maybe?" "Call me," I said, then realized the problem. "Oh, you deleted my number." "Give it to me again," Eunwoo said quickly, already pulling out his phone. "Please, I'll save it right now and I'll never delete it again." I recited my number and watched him save it in his contacts with my name and a heart emoji next to it. That little heart made something flutter in my chest that I firmly told myself to ignore. This wasn't about us. This was about Minjun. As I was getting ready to leave, Eunwoo stopped me at the door. "Gunwoo, thank you for coming here, for telling me, for giving me a chance to know him.
I know I don't deserve it after what I did, but thank you." I just nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and left before I could do something stupid like cry or hug him, or tell him I'd missed him every single day since he left. The next morning, Eunwoo called me at 8 o'clock, asking if he could come visit Min-jun. He showed up at my apartment an hour later with bags from the baby store filled with things I hadn't asked for: diapers, formula, toys, clothes in multiple sizes, a fancy baby monitor, and about a dozen other items that must have cost him a fortune. "You didn't have to buy all this," I said, looking at the pile of shopping bags taking over my living room. "I know," Eunwoo said, "but I wanted to. I've missed 3 months of providing for my son. Let me make up for it however I can." Over the following weeks, Eunwoo became a constant presence in our lives. He came over every single day after work, still wearing his scrubs, eager to spend time with Min-jun. He learned how to change diapers, though his first few attempts were hilariously bad. He learned how to warm bottles to the exact right temperature, how to burp a baby properly, how to soothe Min-jun when he was fussy. I watched him fall in love with our son, and it was beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. Beautiful because Min-jun deserved to have a father who adored him. Heartbreaking because it reminded me of all the reasons I'd fallen for Eunwoo the first place. Kibum noticed the change in our lives immediately. He'd come over one evening to find Eunwoo on the floor doing tummy time with Min-jun, making silly faces to make him smile. "So, the prodigal father returns," Kibum said, his tone carefully neutral.
Eunwoo looked up, and I saw him flush with shame. "You must be Kibum. Gunwoo told me how you helped him through everything. Thank you for being there when I wasn't." "Someone had to be," Kibum said pointedly, but then he sighed and his expression softened a little. "But I'm glad you're stepping up now. Min-jun needs his father." The two of them were awkward around each other at first, but gradually they developed a friendly rapport, bonding over their shared love for Min-jun and their shared exasperation with my stubborn refusal to accept help with things I could obviously not manage alone. One evening, after Eunwoo had left for the night, Kibum stayed behind and fixed me with a serious look. "He still loves you, you know." "Don't," I said immediately. "This isn't about us. It's about Min-jun." "It can be about both," Kibum argued. "I see the way he looks at you, Gunwoo, and more importantly, I see the way you look at him when you think no one's watching." "He broke my heart," I said quietly. "He walked away from me like I meant nothing. I can forgive him for Min-jun's sake, but that doesn't mean I can trust him with my heart again." "Fair enough," Kibum said. "Just don't close yourself off to the possibility, okay? People can change. People can grow." I thought about Kibum's words a lot over the next few days. I thought about them when Eunwoo showed up with my favorite takeout after a particularly exhausting day. I thought about them when he fell asleep on my couch with Min-jun sleeping on his chest, both of them peaceful and content. I thought about them when he looked at me with those soft brown eyes, and I felt my resolve weakening. A month after our reunion, Eunwoo asked me to come over to his apartment for dinner. "I'll cook," he promised, "and I want to talk to you about something." I was nervous the entire taxi ride over, wondering what he wanted to discuss. When I arrived with Min-jun, I found that Eunwoo had transformed his sterile apartment into something warm and inviting. There were candles on the dining table, soft music playing, and the smell of home-cooked food that made my mouth water. "I made your favorite," Eunwoo said, gesturing to the spread on the table. "Hand-pulled noodle soup, just like you used to make for me." I felt tears prick my eyes. He'd remembered. After everything, he'd remembered. We ate dinner while Min-jun napped in the portable crib Eunwoo had set up in his bedroom. The food was delicious, and the conversation flowed easily, like old times. We talked about work, about Min-jun's latest developments, about everything and nothing. Finally, after we'd finished eating and moved to the couch with tea, Eunwoo took a deep breath and said, "I've been seeing a therapist." I looked at him in surprise. "You have?" He nodded. "I started going a few months ago, even before I moved back to Seoul. I realized I had a lot of issues I needed to work through. My relationship with work, my fear of failure, my tendency to run away when things get hard instead of facing them." "That's really good," I said sincerely. "I'm proud of you for doing that." "My therapist helped me understand something important," Eunwoo said, his eyes locked on mine. "When I broke up with you, I told myself it was because I was too busy, too stressed, too overwhelmed with work. But the truth is, I was scared."
Scared of what? Scared of how much I loved you, Eunwoo said softly. Scared of needing someone so much. Scared of letting you down or disappointing you. So when things got hard, instead of leaning on you and trusting that we could get through it together, I pushed you away. I thought I was protecting both of us, but really I was just being a coward. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just listened. I've also made some big changes at work, Eunwoo went on. I talked to my supervisor about my schedule, and I've reduced my hours significantly. I worked 3 12-hour shifts a week now, instead of 5 or 6. It means less money, but it also means I have time for the things that actually matter. Time for Minjin, and time for you, if you'll let me have it. My heart was pounding. Eunwoo, I know I hurt you, he interrupted gently. I know I broke your trust in the worst possible way. I know I have no right to ask for another chance. But Gunwoo, these past few weeks with you and Minjin have been the happiest I've been in almost a year. Not just because of our son, though he's amazing, but because of you. I still love you. I never stopped loving you, even when I was stupid enough to walk away. Tears were streaming down my face now. You really hurt me, I whispered. I know, Eunwoo said, and he was crying too. I know I did, and I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for breaking up with you. I'm sorry for blocking you and making it impossible for you to reach me. I'm sorry for missing your pregnancy and Minjin's birth and the first 3 months of his life. I'm sorry for all of it, and I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you both if you'll let me. I'm scared, I admitted. I'm scared to trust you again. What if you leave again when things get hard? I won't. I promise you I won't. I'm not that person anymore. I've learned from my mistakes. I've grown, and I know now that running away never solves anything. It just makes everything worse. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw the truth in his eyes. He had changed. He was putting in the work, making real changes in his life, showing up consistently for Minjin and for me. I need time, I said finally. I can't just flip a switch and pretend none of it happened, but I'm willing to try. Slowly. We can start dating again. Take it one day at a time and see where it goes. Eunwoo's face lit up with such joy that it took my breath away. Really? You mean it? I mean it, I said. But Eunwoo, if you ever delete my number again, I swear. He pulled me into his arms, holding me tight. Never, he promised fiercely. Never again. I'm never letting you go again. We started dating again, but it was different this time. Better. Eunwoo was present in a way he'd never been before, making time for us, communicating openly about his feelings and his struggles, never letting work take over his entire life. We went on actual dates, leaving Minjin with Kibom, who was thrilled to have uncle time with his favorite baby. We talked about everything we should have talked about before, the hard stuff we'd avoided the first time around. We talked about our expectations for the relationship, about our fears and insecurities, about what we needed from each other. It wasn't always easy, but it was honest, and that made all the difference.
3 months into dating again, Eunwoo asked me and Minjun to move in with him.
He'd found a bigger apartment, one with enough space for all of us, with a nursery for Minjun and room for all my things. "You don't have to answer right now," he said quickly when he saw my hesitation. "Take all the time you need, but I want us to be a family, Gunwoo. A real family, all under one roof." I talked to Keebum about it, and he gave me my blessing with a knowing smile. "You love him," Keebum said simply. "He loves you. You have a beautiful son together. What are you waiting for?" "I'm waiting to make sure it's going to last this time," I admitted. "Nothing in life is guaranteed," Keebum pointed out. "But from what I've seen, that man is completely devoted to you and Minjun. He's done the work. He's changed. At some point, you have to decide to trust again." So I said yes. We moved into the new apartment on a sunny Saturday, with Keebum and Eunwoo's coworker Felix helping us carry boxes. Felix had become a friend over the past few months, and he was thrilled to see Eunwoo so happy. "I've never seen him like this," Felix told me while we unpacked kitchen supplies. "At the hospital, he's always talking about Minjun and you. It's actually kind of annoying how happy he is." But he was grinning when he said it. Our first night in the new apartment, after Minjun was asleep in his new nursery and all the boxes were mostly unpacked, Eunwoo and I sat on the couch together, my head on his shoulder, his arm around me. "Thank you," he said softly, "for giving me another chance, for letting me be part of Minjun's life, for trusting me with your heart again." "Thank you for proving you deserve it," I replied. We celebrated Minjun's first birthday with a big party. Keebum was there, of course, along with Felix, some of my coworkers, and some of Eunwoo's colleagues from the hospital. We had a cake shaped like a teddy bear, and Minjun smashed his face into it with delighted giggles that had everyone laughing. I watched Eunwoo holding our son, wiping frosting off his chubby cheeks, and I felt overwhelmingly grateful. Grateful that I'd had the courage to show up at Eunwoo's door that rainy day. Grateful that Eunwoo had stepped up and become the father and partner I'd always known he could be. Grateful for second chances and new beginnings. That night, after the party was over and Minjun was sleeping off his sugar high, Eunwoo took my hand and led me out to our apartment's balcony. The city lights sparkled below us, and the air was warm and pleasant. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. My heart started racing. "Eunwoo, it's not what you think," he said quickly, then reconsidered. "Well, it is what you think, but not right now. I mean, this is a promise ring, not an engagement ring, though I do plan to give you one of those someday, if you'll have me." He opened the box to reveal a simple silver band with both our initials engraved inside. "This is a promise that I'm in this for the long haul," Eunwoo said seriously. "A promise that I'll never run away again, that I'll always communicate with you, that I'll be the partner and father you both deserve. A promise that I'm yours, completely and forever." I was crying as he slipped the ring onto my finger. "I love you," I said through my tears. "I love you so much." "I love you too," Eunwoo said, pulling me close and kissing me softly. "Thank you for not giving up on us." Looking back now, I can see how every hard moment led us to where we are. The breakup taught us what we needed to work on. The separation taught us how much we meant to each other. Minjun brought us back together and gave us a reason to be better people. And the second chance we gave each other taught us that love isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, doing the work, and choosing each other every single day. Our story isn't a fairy tale. It's messy and complicated and full of mistakes, but it's real and it's ours, and I wouldn't change a single thing. Thank you so much for listening to Gunwoo and Eunwoo's story. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more emotional romance stories. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision about telling someone important news? What would you have done in Gunwoo's situation? Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss our next story. Your support means everything to us, and we love reading your comments and reactions. See you in the next story.